Students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian and I'm streaming to you from beautiful Victoria here in Western Canada. I hope that all of you have had a fantastic week, and I hope that you are going to have a great weekend coming up. Welcome Fuang, hi Chayani, hi Patek, welcome Carolina. Good to see everybody in the class. Students, this is a members chat class. Of course, everybody is welcome to watch. And in this class, we are looking at an IELTS Task 1 writing, specifically for the academic IELTS. Task 1 writing in the academic IELTS can be a few different kinds of topics. It can be a line graph, bar chart, pie graph, flow chart, diagram, maps. For example, today we're looking at a line graph basically on sugars or sweeteners. So for all of those people out there who have a sweet tooth and you like your cakes and confectionery, this might be a bit more interesting for you. And we will go through a Band 9 example essay with a line graph. Line graph is one of the more popular types of questions for the academic IELTS Task 1 writing, although they do like to switch up the Task 1 in academic IELTS, so you should practice all of the different kinds of Task 1 graphs and charts. You can do that on our website, aehelp.com, for academic IELTS. And for those of you who are looking for general IELTS Task 1 examples, strategies, explanations, go to our general IELTS website at gieltshelp.com. These are the websites that we use for our live classes, like today's live class. And so it's a great idea to visit our website and join our premium IELTS package by clicking this big red button that's just right above my head there. It's a one-time payment. You get lifetime access, and when you are in the My Student page, then you've got lots of goodies. You can use this discount code SUPER9 there to get a 10% discount. And then when you pay, then you're in your My Student account, and in your My Student account you have computer-based practice exams, a full interactive course, and off to the right here you have Task 1, Task 2 writing and editing services on both academic and general. So it's a good idea to use those. We are an official IDP affiliate, British Council partner, IELTS Test Registration Center. I'm a certified British Council agent. I have been working with IELTS for almost 20 years. I have taken the IELTS exam and I have trained thousands of students to pass their IELTS. So you're in great hands. Masala, I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. I hope you're doing well also. Students, of course, make sure to keep using our apps. We've got some exciting development coming up in the next little bit on our apps. The apps are Academic IELTS Help, General IELTS Help. You can get those apps from your app stores and you can link them to your web account. And you can also follow us on Instagram. IELTS_AE Help, GIELTS Help. We've got vocabulary, some fun reels for you to learn English and communication. And then if you have questions, of course, don't be shy. Send me an email, adrian@aehelp.com, or you can just send us an email, admin@aehelp.com. And we will get back to you ASAP. We've got more classes, of course. So after this class, we will have a listening class for our subscribers. So it's good to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can join that next chat. Of course, everybody can watch, but you want to join the chat It's good to interact. And then on Saturday, that is tomorrow, we've got speaking part 2, speaking part 3. And on Sunday, we've got a light haul class for you, which will be a full speaking class. And this Sunday, I do not have a running race, so I will have more time than I did last Sunday if you were in that light haul class. So click this link, use this link. I will put it into the chat as well. It's a free class. Light haul is an awesome platform for live learning, whether it's English or computer programming. Definitely check out Light Haul. Okay. We've got some new video releases for you as well. And we always do, so keep checking back on the channel. There it is. That's the latest one there. Carolina, thumbs up. Awesome for the Light Haul class. Yeah. Light Haul, by the way, is really cool because you can video and audio chat with me. So you can actually, like in the real exam, you can see me and I can see you. And it's real time. All right. IELTS Task 1 Writing. So the writing section in the IELTS, both the academic and the general, it's 1 hour. You've got 2 tasks, task 1 and task 2. General is different than academic. General, you write a letter or an email, and it's a narrative, it's a story. In the academic, task 1, as I mentioned, it's a graph or a chart. It's an expository style writing. Okay, if that word is new for you, you should Google it. It's an expository essay. Expository essays have clear rules, structures that you should follow. Okay, if you don't know what an expository essay is, Google it. Or you can check out our website. We explain to you these essays in your course, in your strategies. And in task 1, you spend 20 minutes. Task 2, you spend double, 40 minutes. So task 2 is worth double. Task 2 is worth about 65% of your writing mark. Task 1 is worth about 35%. But that doesn't mean that you can consider task 1 to be less important. Task 1 is very important. You should always start with task 1. Don't start with task 2. A lot of times people, you're allowed to, so it's allowed to start with task 2. But you should start with task 1 because task 1 is easier when you know what you're doing, both in the academic and in the general, because the information is kind of there. It's more or less given. So you have clear direction. In task 2, you have to do more planning, more thinking. The content becomes more challenging, let's say. So in task 1, it kind of warms you up. It gets your brain moving for task 2. So that's why it's a good idea to start with task 1, but never spend more than 20 minutes on task 1. So first, read the question, and we're going to do that. So Phuong, Chayani, Patek, Masala, we're going to work through this essay together. Okay, Creative Edge, welcome, right on time. So we're going to work through this essay together step by step, the same way that you would in your real exam. So firstly, read the question very, very carefully. The following chart shows the availability of several sweeteners per person in a country over a specific period. Report the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Write at least 150 words. Okay, sure. Keep in mind, band 7 to 9 essays are closer to 200 and even 250 words. Okay, so somebody that has great English, good typing skills, wants to get a very good or expert level score, band 8, band 9, you can't just write the minimum requirement, right? It's it's quite challenging, if not impossible. I've spoken to several different examiners, and they all said that they basically never gave a high band score, like a band 8 or a band 9, to an essay that was just 150 words. So keep that in mind. Even if it is well written, simply just because it's hard to get all of that key information down in 150 words. It's not a lot of sentences. That's only like 150 words is like 9 sentences. Okay, so 200 words is more like 12 to 15 sentences. And certainly you can write that many sentences with task 1. Okay, so task 1 should have an introduction, an introductory paragraph. It should have an overview, and it should have analysis or analyses for plural, including some kind of a summary. And I'll show you what I mean by a summary there as well. So it's got those parts, the A, B, C, and C's got kind of that second part there, so pay attention to that. A, the introductory paragraph. Members, do you know what the introductory paragraph should be? So how do you introduce task 1 for the academic IELTS? What do you do? How do you get that nice high band score start? How do you start with that band 8, band 9? What do you do? Yeah, so Patek says detailed paraphrasing exactly of the question, right? Okay. No, Creative Edge, you definitely don't lose band scores for writing over the minimum. You only lose scores if you write less than 150 words. As I just mentioned, you actually get more band scores if you write more than the minimum and it's good writing. Okay, not too much more, Creative Edge. And if anybody says, oh, you lose marks if you write more than 150 words, that is a very good sign that they do not know enough information about the IELTS. So they're just guessing the information. They don't actually connect with British Council or IDP or the examiners. Okay. So if you're talking to someone who really knows the IELTS, who really is connected to IELTS, they will tell you that you should write a little bit more than the minimum. At least here means minimum, right? It means minimum 150, at least. It doesn't mean don't write any more, okay? All right, so introductory paragraph, yes, very good. So Chayani Patek, yes, it's detailed paraphrasing. So paraphrase the question and add details from the graph, okay? So I'll show you how to do that. We'll do it together, okay? So here's the question, of course, all right? And here's the graph that we're using today. So we take a look at the graph for the introductory paragraph, and we look at some of those details that help us to write a better introduction than just paraphrasing. Some students just paraphrase, and that's okay, but it's not a high band paraphrase. So what we want to do is we want to look always from top, okay, well, let's say top down, okay, left to right and top to down, okay? That's how we're always looking at the graph. So that's the order of information. Of course, in English-speaking countries, we read from top down, left to right, so it makes sense. And so first we look at the title, okay? So right away, we start to get more information because take a look. The question says the following chart. Okay. Well, what kind of chart? It's a line graph. Okay. So right away we can paraphrase and give more information. We can say this line graph, or the given line graph, right? So instead of just saying the chart. And then here it says shows the availability of several sweeteners per person. Okay. So what is those several sweeteners? Well, we've got the total. Okay. We've got refined cane and beet sugar. We've got corn sweeteners. We've got honey. And then right behind my head there, we have edible syrups, right? So in the real IELTS, you're doing this quickly, simple math, no rocket science here. So all we do is we count them, okay? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 different types of sugars or sweeteners. Here it's kind of strange that they grouped refined cane and beet sugars, but whatever. We'll keep it grouped. It's not our deal. So we've got 4 sets of, or we've got 5 sets of data, and we've got 4 different types of sweeteners, quote unquote. Okay. So we can start with that. So that's more detail there for us in our paraphrase. Okay. So the given line graph, and then here we're using this, instead of shows, indicates the availability. Now, maybe you can paraphrase the word availability, and if you can think of a synonym or another way, great. If not, just leave it, and then you can think about it later on. So the given line graph indicates the availability, and then here, instead of several sweeteners, we can say of refined cane and beet sugars, corn sweeteners, edible syrups, and honey. Okay. All right, so instead of just saying several, I'm just going to name them. All right, per person in a country. All right. Per individual instead of per person. And then in a country, instead of in a country, I can see it's here, it's US. Okay. And here it even says per capita. So if you don't say per individual, you can say per capita. Okay. So nothing fancy here in the introduction. All I'm really doing is I'm using the information from the graph and just giving those extra pieces of detail to the introduction so that the examiner can see that I'm not just simply copying or paraphrasing the question. Okay. All right. Per individual in the US. Okay. And then here it says over a specific period. Okay, so that's the time in the question, right? Well, we can see that here it says 1966 to 2012. So we can be a little bit more specific as well. Okay, in the US, over the course of, what is that, 46 years? Over the course of 46 years from 1966 to 2012. Okay, so I'm a bit more specific with the date, of course, for the reader. Notice how here I have this comma to show that this is the definition of 46 years. Okay. Patek, you do not always put a comma before and. It really depends where it is. Notice Patek, good question. Notice Patek how I didn't put a comma here. There's no comma in this and, but there is a comma with this and. The reason why is because this first and is showing the grouping of refined cane and beet sugars. But this last piece here, and honey, is showing that this is the last item in the list. So I have a comma here when it's the last item in the list, but I don't have a comma when I'm simply grouping two items in the list. Okay, this tells my reader that the refined cane and beet sugars is grouped as one set of data. So that was a really good question, Patek, before about the and. Use of comma, if you're looking for a band 8 or a band 9 score on your IELTS exam, understanding how to use commas is a very, very important skill. You can find out more about that, Patek, when you go to the website, you log in. And at the top, let me see if I can kind of show you this here. At the top there, you have blogs in the website on the academic and on the general as well. And then when I click on that blog, you can do a search for commas, comma rules or comma use search. And then you will find this article here on the website, IELTS Task 1 and Task 2 using commas, 12 rules to follow. Click on read more, and then here it will go through the 12 most common situations with examples of where and when to use commas in your writing. And for those students who are at an intermediate, so band 6 or higher, you should definitely read this kind of information, okay? So that's on the website. It's free. Everybody can read it. It's one of the blogs. Check it out. There's lots of important topics on the IELTS and on writing in our blogs there. So check that out on the website. Okay, again, that's aehelp.com. All right. Good question, Patek. So back to the point here. Now I have a good start to the introduction, right? So here's the original question. The following chart shows the availability of several sweeteners per person in a country over a specific period. Report the main features, make comparisons where relevant. And then here's my introduction. The given line graph indicates the availability of refined cane and beet sugars, corn sweeteners, edible syrups, and honey per individual in the US over the course of 46 years from 1996 to 2012. Now, is my introduction done? Is this good enough? What do you think? Does this deserve a band 9? Am I deserving of that score with this introduction? Do I have enough detail? If I'm in a university class for statistics, is it good enough? Masala, I think you're jumping ahead, but it's a good jump, Masala. Masala basically says, I think Masala is saying no, not yet. You missed an important piece of information. So Mal Chayani, thank you, but no, it's not quite yet. It was kind of a loaded question. Masala says that, hey Adrian, you didn't really mention this component here about the actual measurement of consumption. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree, Masala. It would be important for my audience to know the volume, the amount of consumption right away in the introduction, right? So that they can comprehend the information that's going to follow, right? So it's pounds per person. Let's see. It's pounds per person in dry weight, and it goes from 0 to 160 with intervals of 20. Okay, so we've got 20-pound intervals. Pounds makes sense because it's US measures in pounds. So we need to fit that information to make it a truly complete introduction, right? In a business class or in a human geography class, that would be an important piece of information your professor would be asking for. What's your measurement? Okay. So the given line graph indicates the availability of refined cane and beet sugars, corn sweeteners, edible syrups, and honey per individual in the U.S. Given as pounds per, and here we can use the capita in dry weight from 0 to 160 lbs. lbs is pounds, with intervals of 20 lbs over the course of 46 years. Okay. Now, if you can't do it in one sentence correctly, don't force it. Your introduction should not have mistakes. Then you write it in 2 sentences. You simplify the sentences, you make them clear, and you write it in 2 simpler sentences. You can still get a band 9, okay? But you can't have mistakes. So the given line graph indicates the availability of refined cane and beet sugars, corn sweeteners, edible syrups, and honey per individual in the U.S. given as pounds per capita in dry weight from 0 to 160 pounds with intervals of 20 pounds over the course of 46 years from 1966 to 2012. So here we basically have our y-axis, right? So this part here is the y-axis and this part here is the x-axis. This is considered your Band 9 introduction. So if you are wondering, what does a Band 9 intro look like? That's what it looks like. Okay. All right. Sunantha writes, this line graph illustrates the different types of sweeteners such as refined cane and beet sugars, corn, and honey according to U.S. citizens, according to consumption per person in the U.S. over the course of 46 years. Sunantha, be careful to have accurate information, and you do not need capital letter R or capital H. Those are common words or common nouns, okay? Chayani writes, the given line graph presented the completeness sweetener type consists of sugar cane stick and beet sugars, corn sweeteners, edible syrups, and honey per individual in U.S. almost 4 decades. It's almost 5 decades, so be careful, Chayani. Make sure you have accurate information. Task 1, they are marking accuracy. If you say 4 decades, but it's almost 5 decades, then it's wrong. Chayani, you really have to pay attention to your grammar and content, okay? To improve that. Masala says the line graph illustrates the various types of sweeteners such as refined cane and beet sugars, corn, and honey according to per U.S. consumption over the course of 5 decades. The y-axis depicts the dry weight as per individual in pounds from 0 to 140 with intervals of 20. Masala, that's quite good. Okay, you're very, very close to a high band score there for sure, to a 9. Okay? And it's okay to say 5 decades because 46 is within the 5-decade range. So that's good. All right. So the second piece then is the overview. Okay? So we finished the introductory paragraph. And in the IELTS, they like to see a separate paragraph for the overview. So you move a space down and you give the overview. Now, the overview is this part of the question. So in the question, when they say report the main features, they're basically saying write the overview. Okay? So nothing too fancy there. They're just basically saying write the overview. Okay, so let's do that. When you look at this line graph, the overview is simply the main observable data where you don't really have to look at numbers. You can just look at the big patterns of the picture. Okay, so overview means give the most to least important info based on the visual information without looking at detailed data or numbers, okay? And I mean without, so you don't need to look at the detailed data or the numbers, right? So here, we want to kind of look at the overview. So what do we see? Well, first of all, we see this total, right? Okay. What can we see with the total? What do we see with the total? Well, we see that there's this kind of somewhat of a fluctuation of the consumption of sweeteners, right? So, or availability, okay? There's an increase here, but there's also a decrease here. So it's not a clear increase like this, right? We've got a flat line here. We've got an increase here. We've got a decrease here. So there's variability. There's change, right? There's fluctuation. That's right, Chayani. That's right, Carolina. This would be a fluctuation. It's a hill shape, right? So this is not a clear increase. It's not a clear decrease. It's a fluctuation. So the availability of sweeteners in the US in these 45 years fluctuated. Okay, that's point number one for the overview. All right. What's point number two? Well, here in the earlier years, we've got a lot of refined cane and beet sugar, and then that decreases and kind of flattens out, right? And then we've got the corn sweeteners that increase and then kind of fluctuate like that, right? So we don't need to get into a lot of detail here. We just need to say that the primary sweeteners, so the most used sweeteners, it changes, right? It changes from refined cane and beet sugar to corn sweetener. Okay. And then with honey and edible syrups, they're very, very low on the scale. So they don't really make up an important amount of sweeteners used, okay? So clearly, then we can, for our overview, say that, point one, we've got fluctuations. Point two, we've got changes in the primary sweeteners that are used. And then point three, we've got a couple of, I should put it here, yeah, we've got a couple of sweeteners or sugars that are used but don't really make up too much of the market for sweeteners in the US, okay? So again, using good grammar, using good vocabulary, you should always check your paragraphs once you've finished them. You write your overview, okay? So overall, the all right, so I'm just writing the information that I just said. Okay. There. So, overall is a leading expression. Overall basically here means the total, right? So overall, total is the same. So here, when you see the word total, you can think about that as overall, right? Overall, the availability of sweeteners in America, another way to say the US, USA, during the given period fluctuated, right? So that's this one here, and I've given that information. Now, in addition, the primary type of sweetener on the market, right? So the availability of the primary or the most used sweetener, there are lots of ways to write it, changed from refined cane and beet sugars to corn sweeteners. Okay. So, and then it changed again at the very end of the period, which is interesting. I just noticed that. We can get into that later. Okay. And then at the same time, honey and edible syrups remained a small part of the total, which they are. I mean, look at them. They're just like 10 pounds. They're very negligible. You should not spend a lot of time, effort, or many words or sentences explaining honey and edible syrups. Why not? Students, why should you not focus too much in the essay on honey and edible syrups? Okay. It's an important question here. I see this a lot where IELTS candidates, they see that, oh, there's some honey here and there's edible syrups. Maybe they like honey, and then they start writing about how honey started at 10 pounds and it remained a consistent 10 pounds throughout the period, as well as edible syrups were just slightly below, and they're writing all of that information and spending too much time on that. So why is it not good to spend a lot of effort, time, or words on edible syrups and honey? Why should I be careful not to really focus on that too much? And there's a very simple answer to this question. It's not a tricky question. There's a very simple answer to it. The answer comes from paying attention to the question, right? So it says, report the main features and make comparisons where relevant, okay? Making comparisons or reporting for honey and edible syrups is not main features. It's not highly relevant, okay? So pay attention to the question. We're much more interested in refined cane sugars and corn sweeteners. They make up a lot more of the overall data. If you're a businessman and you're in the sweeteners business, you'll not be too excited about honey or edible syrups at this point, okay? All right. Now, your overview, it has to be really well structured and well written, because your overview also becomes the thesis or the outline of your essay. Okay, keep that in mind, students. So basically it means that this is my point number one, okay? And in the analysis, I'm going to give more information about that. This is my point number two, and I'm going to give more information about that. And then if I have some time, then this is my point number three, and I'm going to give more detailed information about that. Okay. Creative Edge writes, overall, it is apparent from the graph that fluctuations were seen in consumption of sweeteners in the US. However, maximum number of consumers got attracted toward corn sweeteners from refined cane sugars. We don't know that. Maybe it just wasn't available on the market. Creative Edge, you have to be very careful not to say information that you don't know. We don't know why corn sweeteners became more popular. Maybe they were cheaper to produce. Maybe it was better for the US to import those. Maybe there was some kind of an insect or virus that killed the beets and the cane sugar, but didn't affect the corn sweeteners. You can see that at the end here, it becomes more popular. We don't know the why reasons. Students, don't make guesses of why. We don't know why, okay? Honey, people love honey. It's just a lot more expensive than corn sweeteners. So people don't use less honey because it doesn't taste as good as corn sweeteners. They use less honey because honey is extremely expensive and difficult to produce. We don't know such information from this line graph. You cannot add information like that because you will lose marks, okay? This is an expository essay. You can only explain what you see. Be very careful about that, okay? Creative edge, all right? Be very, very careful, all right? I see that mistake a lot where students try to kind of guess what happens. Like, people like corn sweeteners more, so they started eating them more. We don't know that. We don't know if that's the reason. So causality is rare, okay? It's rare to know causality. Careful with that. Okay, so here now, I'm just going to simply look at my overview point 1, the total, because the total is very important here, okay? And I can write about that. So my analysis, which is my third part of the task 1, all right? Details the overview, okay? So here we go. In more detail, in 1966, there was, and this is because I'm referring to the time, right? So students often ask, when do I use present tense? When do I use past tense? Well, you use the past tense when you're referring to a past time. Here I'm referring to a past time. In more detail, in 1996, there was roughly 130, and know your abbreviations. Don't always write pounds. LBS, sweeteners, available to each U.S. citizen. This number remained relatively the same until the start of the 90s, at which time it increased. Okay, so here all I'm doing is, here's the 90s. Okay, I've got the 90s there, and I can see that the increase really starts to happen, well, maybe the 80s, right? We've got slight increase going on in the 80s. IELTS, they're not going to be super picky. So if you say 80s, if you say 90s, they'll be like, okay, whatever. He sees the increase here, she sees the increase there. It's not going to be the deal breaker for your band 9, okay? So, or we can say mid 80s if we want to be really picky here. You guys are gonna be like, Adrian, but no. Okay, so let's do mid 80s. All right, make everybody happy. Start of the mid 80s. Now, when you write mid 80s, it should look like this: mid-80s. Okay. So, so this number remained relatively the same until the start of the mid-80s, at which time it increased and peaked. When did it peak? Late 90s, 1999, let's say. And peaked at 160 pounds per capita in 1999. Okay. and peaked at 160 lbs per capita in 1999. Okay. Now, notice how here I'm simplifying, right? So if you're really looking for that band 8, band 9, not only are you writing about 200, 250 words for task 1, but you're also using concise language wherever possible so that you don't write a ton of words and you include as much useful information as possible. Okay. Chayani writes, overall, the graph provides fluctuations-based sweeteners consumption in the U.S. Say, I don't understand what that sentence means, Chayani. Overall, the data shows fluctuations, not the graph. The graph shows a lot of different information. Okay. All right. So, Chayani, lots of writing. Make sure you're getting your writing checked and edited. It looks like it needs a fair bit of editing to be clear and accurate. Domenico writes, overall, the availability of sweeteners in the USA fluctuated across the given period. However, the consumption of refined and beet sugars was the most demanded product by the U.S. citizens, whereas the demand of honey remained steady during the observed period. Forget about the honey, Domenico. We want the other pieces more, okay? We want to focus more on the differences or the changes in refined cane and beet sugars versus corn sweeteners, right? So this is much, much more interesting data for us than this data here, okay? All right, so still on the total here, we still want to describe this decrease, okay? And we don't need to go into a lot of detail here. We just want to mention that after that time, there was a decrease, okay? So after this year, or we can say after the start of the new millennium, the overall or the availability of sweeteners gradually decreased until the end of the period. Okay, so here we can see this decrease until the end of the period. All right, now this is the total. That's the most important information. Let's take a look at the pieces that make up the total. Okay. In 1966, refined cane and beet sugars dominated the market, right? So this is where you want to use that word, dominated the market, with 100 pounds per capita, right? You can see that the other three were all under 20 pounds. Okay, so that's what we want to start with. Line graphs are linear, they're chronological. You go by time. So you're going by time here, 1966, 71. Okay, so it's half decade intervals here. And so your writing is also following this chronology, all right, this time. I know I'm giving you a lot of information, a lot of new vocabulary here, students. So remember, this video is being recorded. And if you're not catching all of it, that's okay. You can watch the video again and then check it out again. Masala, don't be wordy, okay? So when you write looking in greater detail, it's wordy. Good high band essays avoid using any extra words. So in greater detail or in more detail, you don't need the looking part. All right. And take out the word only for only 130 pounds. It's not only, it's quite a bit, per person. Okay, so no extra words, no unnecessary words. When you're at home and you're practicing task 1, after you've finished writing task 1, you should think about, where can I take out any unnecessary words and where can I put in some better information? Okay, you should always be thinking that way to get those high band scores, the band 7, 8, 9s. All right. Okay, so in 1996, or sorry, I keep saying that, 1966, careful with your wording. In 1966, cane and beet sugars dominated the market at 100 lbs per person. Okay. Again, make sure to use short form where possible, because if you keep writing number, per capita, pounds, it's just taking up a lot of time. And so you want to simplify at 100 pounds per person, as where the other sugars were less than 20 pounds per person, right? So that's the starting period. Okay, that's the start period here. Now, cane sugars and beet sugars, and I don't keep writing refined. You don't need to keep writing refined cane sugars, of course, right? Refined means that it's not raw, that it's gone through processing. But once you've written that one time at the beginning, you can just write cane and beet sugars. You don't need to write refined again and again, right? It's unnecessary. Okay? So after this time, the use gradually decreased. Please don't get stuck on writing about this kind of a fluctuation that's happening here. It's too small. It's too detailed. We're more interested in this decrease and then this flattening. Okay? So after this time, the use of cane sugars, or the availability, gradually decreased until 1986, and then leveled out at around 60 pounds per person. Right? When you're observing these line graphs, try to verbalize them before you write it. Try to say it. Okay? So over the course of the next 2 decades, because 1966 to 1986 is 2 decades, it's 20 years, right? There's a gradual decrease, and then its availability leveled out at about 60 pounds, right? Okay, so over the course over the next 2 decades, this sweetener decreased on the market, and from 1986 to 2000, what is it, 11 or 12? I think it's 11, yeah. To 2011, 2012, I guess, because the graph says 2011, but at the top here, you notice it says 2012, so I'm guessing 2012 is the end of the period. We can say that. Okay. So in the next 2 decades, the sweetener decreased on the market, and from 1986 to 2012, it leveled out at 60 pounds per person. Okay. All right. Good. Usually you need a comma after indicating a time frame or a time period. Okay. Sunantha writes, overall, the graph shows several fluctuations of sweetener consumption in America. However, the ratio of honey remain the same. It's interesting how everybody really wants to write about honey. But again, honey is not that important. I love honey, don't get me wrong. I am completely in love with honey. I love honey. I love tasting honey. But it's not my emotions here that guide my writing. It's logic, right? It's a line graph, okay? So over the next 2 decades, this sweetener decreased on the market, and from 1986 to 2012, it leveled out at 60 pounds per person. Conversely, or on the other hand, right? You need to use good connectives. Conversely means opposite or opposite to. So conversely, corn sweeteners, right, increased rapidly and surpassed cane and beet sugars around 1984. Okay. So conversely, corn sweeteners increased rapidly after 1966 and surpassed beet and cane sugars on the market in 1984. Corn sweeteners peaked. When did they peak? Around, let's see, around there. Around 1998, let's say. It doesn't have to be perfect, students. So 1998 at around 80 pounds per person, and then decreased. Peaked in corn sweetener availability, not corn sweeteners, but corn sweetener availability. Peaked in 1998 at 80 pounds per person, and then decreased gradually. Eventually, falling slightly below beet and cane sugars in 2010. Okay, and I don't need to write more numbers there. So here in 2010, this mark here, it kind of falls below, right? And then honey and edible syrups. Now we can get to honey and edible syrups. If you don't have time, so if I hit the 20-minute mark, students, I'm going to stop, okay? You can get a band 9 with that essay without even mentioning honey and edible syrups at the end. If you mentioned honey and edible syrups somewhere in the essay, and we did that here, and we did it here as well. So we've got honey here, and we've got honey and edible syrups remained a small part of the total. We've got it there as well, okay? So if I don't write anything about honey and syrup in the analysis here, I can still get a band 9. Why? Because I've answered the question. Remember, the question says, report the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Arguably, honey and edible syrups, not really relevant, not in the grand total of the availability of sweeteners in the US during this period. Okay, all right. So here, what I do is I check my time. If I'm at 20 minutes of writing, I stop. In fact, if I'm at, let's say 17 minutes here, I stop writing and I don't worry about honey. I do something else instead. So if I hit 17 minutes here, students, Okay. Let's say 17 minutes. I stop, and instead of writing about honey and edible syrups, I do what? What do I do? So what's a better strategy than writing about syrups? Yeah, and Miles says, what about the conclusion? There's no conclusion, Miles. There's a summary, okay? But if I'm at 17 minutes, I don't write a summary. I don't write about honey and edible syrups. What do I do? Oh, it'll be more. You can, I mean, you'll know that it's more. Let me tell you how many words it is right now. So right now, this is 235 words. This essay. So exactly, Patek. I review. So I review for critical mistakes. Exactly. What would be a critical mistake? Okay. Confusing sentences. Wrong data. Okay. So if I accidentally said corn sweeteners instead of beet and cane sugar, so if I mix them up somewhere where it's confusing, or if I wrote 1958 here instead of 1998, right? Spelling is okay, but spelling is not the most important. The most important is looking for confusing sentences and wrong information or wrong use of data, wrong information. Okay? That's what you're mainly looking for in your essay. So you're reading it through from the top. So you go, okay, the given line graph indicates the availability of refined cane and beet sugars, corn sweeteners, edible syrups, and honey per individual in the U.S., given as pounds per capita in dry weight from 0 to 160 pounds, with intervals of 20 pounds over the course of 46 years from 1966 to 2012. Good. Overall, the availability of sweeteners in America during the given period fluctuated. In addition, the primary type of sweetener on the market changed from refined cane and beet sugars to corn sweeteners, while honey and edible syrups remained a small part of the total. In more detail, in 1966, there were roughly 130 pound sweeteners available to each U.S. citizen. This number remained relatively the same until the start of the mid-80s, at which time it increased and peaked at 160 pounds per capita in 1999. After the start of the new millennium, the availability of sweeteners gradually decreased until the end of the period. In 1966, cane and beet sugars dominated the market at 100 pounds per person, as where the other sugars were less than 20 pounds per person. Over the next 2 decades, this sweetener decreased on the market, and from 1986 to 2012, it leveled out at 60 pounds per individual. I'm going to change that to individual just to make it a bit more exciting. Conversely, corn sweeteners increased rapidly after 1966 and surpassed beet and cane sugars on the market in 1984. Corn sweetener availability peaked in 1998 at 80 pounds per person and then decreased gradually, eventually falling slightly below beet and cane sugars in 2010. Okay, good. All right, so now, if I have time, if I'm that super stellar 10-star IELTS candidate, then I would write something like this. But again, it's not necessary. At this point, I'm done. I would focus my energy on task 2. Okay, so in summary, the U.S. sweetener market during this period was comprised of either cane and beet sugar or corn sweetener, as where honey and edible syrups contributed only around 10 pounds per person in any given year. Okay, so that would be my 250th word sentence there at the end. But again, not necessary. Okay, so that would be my closing summary to that paragraph, guaranteeing me that band 9, but again, not necessary. Okay, so that is what the essay should look like there. Okay, so one more time that summary, just so you don't feel like I'm rushing through it. In summary, the U.S. sweetener market, we might even hyphenate that. Sweetener market during the period was comprised means made up of, yeah, made up of either cane and beet sugar or corn sweeteners, as where honey and edible syrups contributed only 10 pounds per person in any given year. So I'm not going to say that there's a difference, even though you can see it, there is a little bit of a difference, but it's about 10 pounds, okay, for these ones. The bottom. All right. So that's if I have time. Now, if I've kind of, run out of 20 minutes here, I might have time to add this sentence at the very end of the writing section. So if I do a good job in task 2 and I have a couple minutes left and I'm like, I finished task 2, I still have a bit of time, I reviewed task 2, I'm happy with task 2, and I still have a minute or two, oh yeah, task 1, I can add one more sentence there to make it awesome, okay? So you can do that, okay? Chayani's asking if we can use this punctuation. Yeah, of course, Chayani. So using the per sign, so it's called the forward slash. Okay, so yes, absolutely, Chayani. So using forward slash to indicate per. So using symbols correctly. For example, forward slash to indicate per, okay, that means per, is very useful in task 1 to increase coherence and to be concise. Okay, absolutely, yeah. All right. Okay, students, that is task 1, line graph, writing, overview. Sorry, I should say introduction, overview. Coming up in a little less than an hour, so in 50 minutes, everybody, we're going to have a listening exercise, and that listening audio will be coming from our website. So again, to all of our viewers, if you enjoy these live classes, definitely check out our websites, aehelp.com for academic IELTS and gieltshelp.com for general IELTS. That's where you can learn your writing, your reading, speaking, and of course listening. We're doing listening next class. We're using the listening audio. We have our own exams for the IELTS, our own sample exams, okay? And yeah, just check it out. Go to aehelp.com. By the way, check out that blog that I showed you, everybody, the task 1, task 2 comma rules. And then, yeah, go to the website and click on this big red button there to join our premium IELTS package that's above my head. As I mentioned, we are an IDP affiliate, British Council partner. I'm a British Council agent. You're in great hands with us. So learn for success. You're very welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed the lesson, everybody. Masala, thank you. And hopefully I'll see all of you in the next class for General IELTS. Again, it's gieltshelp.com. Go here. I'm Adrian. I'm signing out. I will be back in less than an hour, so in about 45 minutes, to teach you some listening skills and strategies for the listening section. Don't forget about that little extra bonus there, the Super 9, for that 10% discount on the websites. Bye for now, everybody, and see you soon. Thank you, Carolina, for moderating this class.